All right, we are live at 5. Well, we're live at 5 in Ireland anyway. We got Jesse Bosch from interviewME joining us. He's in South Africa, so it's 6 o'clock. And I think we got about 65 people that registered for this, and I'm sure a few other people would jump on. And I think a lot of those folks are actually in South Africa. So I'm probably competing with Bruce Whitfield's Money Show on your commute home. But hopefully you're joining us today.
I actually was at an event with Bruce Whitfield and Adrian Gore about a month ago. What a good man.
Well, listen, Jesse, one of the things we're going to chat today about is hiring and retaining the best. And I'm going to hand over to you in a second to do an intro. But just very quickly, for anyone that doesn't know me, my name is Allan Boyle. My company is Saltwater Consulting, and I work with scale-ups and help them implement operational rigor. So enough about me. I think the main idea here today is to talk about talent acquisition, to talk about onboarding, to talk about energizing teams. And the right person to help me have this discussion is Jesse Bosch. So Jesse, do you want to give us a quick intro?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Al, for having me. I mean, it's always good to jump on these podcasts and just, kind of see what comes of it. But my name is Jesse. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called interviewME. interviewME is a one-way video interviewing platform. Fairly new term that's been thrown around in South Africa, but I think very popular in the US and Europe. And we know that South Africa is typically the guys that come out, with the technology at the end. But we're hoping to change that trend now. So, but yeah, I mean, that's a very brief synopsis. I could dive into an entire sales pitch, but I don't necessarily know if you want to know that.
Well, actually, I do have a few questions about it, because if you look at the challenges, there's a lot happening in the marketplace at the moment. There's people moving around all the time, but it's amplified now. So we're hearing about the Great Resignation, the Great Reorganization, everything. And I think certainly the talent acquisition teams, and we're seeing a lot of that in scale-ups. Scale-ups are now saying, right, well, it's not just the big tech that are having these big talent acquisition teams. It's happening across all organizations. And their metric is obviously time to hire. And then obviously the HR metric, let's call it the traditional HR, I'm starting to see it all as a combined people operations group now. And I think a lot of the people in that industry are seeing that as well. But HR are looking at metrics around retention and making sure people aren't churning out. So, and then you've got the hiring managers in the middle that are saying, well, I've got to manage up, I've got to manage sideways, I've got to manage my existing team. And oh, hell, I've got to go and jump into 5-10 interviews because I'm hiring ferociously. And I mean, my experience in big tech before is, we always had 20 or 30 people that we were looking to hire at any given time. And every leader was the same. So it's a lot of pressure on hiring. So interviewME, that's you solving the problem. Tell me a little bit about that.
I think it's important to understand, I think the concept as to why we started interviewME. And I guess it's twofold. One is I've been in many a not so good interview where we put out a job post, we'd get hundreds, if not thousands of candidates applying for jobs. And to be honest, there was some sense of bias when I decided who to choose to interview, because a lot of the CVs looked identical, and it was really tough for me to differentiate between all these candidates, similar years experience, qualifications, all of that. And I guess the candidates that I decided to interview, I kind of judged on who had the best formatted CV. That was really my main differentiator. And the only thing that the way for me to get to know these candidates was typically to have a first interview. And, some of my team did screening calls. And more often than not, 2 minutes into the call, I'd very quickly realize that the candidate wasn't a fit. But out of courtesy, we stay on the call, we answer questions, we ask questions. And I just felt like it was such a waste of time in my day. And it was also kind of wasting the candidate's time, because, we have really kind of made a decision in our mind very quickly, but the candidate's now giving their best shot, and then to find out that they haven't made it. And I was like, surely there's got to be another way to get to know the person behind the CV without actually having to meet with them in person. So the whole idea of one-way interviews is quite common overseas, as I mentioned earlier, but no one in South Africa was doing it. And that kind of embarked me on this journey to develop interviewME. But the other thing that I was thinking about is the recruitment process in my mind. And I did a bit of research and a couple of surveys, and found that a lot of people agreed with my thought process. Is the recruitment process was typically a reactive process. And what I mean by that is, like you said, you'd put out a couple of vacancies. So we're looking for 10 people aggressively. and you would put out a job post. You would wait for candidates to apply first, and whether you have an applicant tracking system or you receive CVs the old traditional way of, via email, you then screen all of those CVs. Then you would conduct first interviews, then second interviews, third interviews. Then you'd make an offer, and then it's 30 days notice. And all of a sudden, we're like 70, 80 days down the line. And I noticed that a lot of companies hire for these positions frequently. And I was like, well, why are we being so reactive in this process? Why don't we start building our own talent pool of candidates, so that when we do hire, we just reach out to that pool that we've already pre-vetted through our one-way video interviewing tool, where we can tell things like, because our software allows you to ask particular questions from the candidates, and we can identify culture fits, competency-based questions, all sorts of things. And we've identified that a lot of companies make use of these various job boards out there. I'm not going to mention any names. And I was like, why are they using it? Because they want an access to a talent pool of candidates that they can reach out to, because perhaps they're not getting the applications that they need at the time that they're hiring, right? And when people do that, they typically need to hire fast, because there's a vacancy and we need to get these people into these roles so that we can get it from a productivity perspective, the business will do well. And I said, well, let's use one-way interviews to start building talent pools of pre-interviewed, pre-vetted candidates where our clients can essentially cherry pick the best talent as and when they need them. So what a lot of our clients are doing is consistently advertising throughout the year, having a disclaimer saying we may not necessarily have a vacancy for you right now, but if you're interested in working for our business and interested in, for example, a sales role, a marketing role, a finance role, complete this one-way interview. And when we do have a vacancy available, we already know who you are, what you're all about, and reach out to you. And the likelihood of that in-person interview then happening is going to be quality, because you already have a good insight in terms of who that candidate is. But the whole idea of one-way interviews is our software will interview the candidates for you. The purpose of our platform is not to replace in-person interviews, but rather help you identify who you actually want to spend time with, so that the quality of the time that you're investing into those candidates is top class.
Okay, and that's what I was going to ask you there. I could imagine there's people on this call thinking, well, hang on a second, and I know myself at first was, I would want to have that two-way interaction, but this is a way effectively of building up your own internal board of videos where maybe there's some more generalist type questions that cover off the screening part of the call, and you get that in a video format. And then that's obviously all cloud-based, and it's easy to search and access and categorize various people in the pool, correct?
Yeah, and more importantly, and also allows companies to collaborate. So typically the HR function would go and source the candidates, do the initial screening, first interviews, and then there would need to be a second or a third interview by the various hiring managers. Now, I've often sat where I've had my recruitment team say, hey, Jesse, this candidate is top class. You should definitely, they tick all the boxes. And again, I jump into the interview with that candidate and I message my recruiter after. I'm like, what were you thinking? And for me, that was quite an evident sign that there was a disconnection between hiring managers and HR teams. And a lot of the time I'd go back to the HR teams and say, well, I thought this candidate was terrible. They're like, why? They were brilliant on the call that I had, or the team's call. And our platform allows the hiring managers and the HR managers to collaborate on those one-way interviews before the hiring manager agrees to actually interview them too. And it also will then start helping us inform the HR teams as to exactly what we're looking and where we feel they're falling short, so that we can then start making informed decisions as to how we should better market the position, or what kind of questions, etc., we need to be chatting to the candidates about. Okay,
that's interesting. Why do you think there's a disconnect between, I work with a number of talent acquisition people and some amazing people, and they very much see it as a partnership with the hiring managers. Do you think hiring managers are just overwhelmed, or do you think that they just feel that hiring is not something for them? And I've come across this before. It's just almost like I've heard people say, hang on, I'm managing the people. It's up to HR to go and hire the people and bring them in, which I completely disagree with. But do you think there's a disconnect?
Sure. I think there is a form of disconnect in terms of the way that the interviews are being conducted. So you'll typically find an HR person will ask a set of questions in perhaps a different manner, with a different tonality attached to it, and get a different response from the candidate. When the candidate's being interviewed by, for example, a hiring manager, different set of questions, they're basing their decisions based on different criteria. And although the HR manager, or the HR teams rather, have got some form of a relationship in terms of the idea of, it's like a broken telephone, right? Like for me, someone will say, well, Jesse, this person communicated really well. And yes, that is something that I was looking for as a hiring manager. But as a hiring manager, maybe your kind of communication and my communication are different. And by having a one-way interviewing tool, we can have a preset defined set of questions to ensure that there is uniformity in terms of the way that we conduct interviews and how we're judging those candidates to determine whether we want to have an in-person interview or not. So I don't necessarily say there is a complete disconnection, but you're dealing with different people in different departments. And I can often say to my sales team, this is my mission, this is my vision, these are all the things that I want to achieve, but they may have a different perception in terms of what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think just sort of flipping this over to the candidate's experience, how do they feel about this video? They're used to the traditional apply. And as the candidate experience, I think, does need to be changed, because a lot of organizations say you need to fit your CV into a certain format. It's actually quite difficult, especially for a candidate applying for a bunch of jobs in different companies. So is this, what is the candidates, what is the feedback you're getting from candidates in terms of their experience?
Sure. So, I mean, it's brand new, right? So a lot of people are like, what is this? And like, we have had the odd case where they're like, I'm here for the interview. And we're like, no, it's a one-way interview. And I think it's about educating the candidate. But the real advantage is, and I think I speak from personal experience, where I was lazy in terms of drafting a really good CV. I had a few bullet points. I didn't do a cover letter. I just didn't think it mattered. I was like, just look at my credentials. And often I got rejected by companies, and I was like, just give me an opportunity to be interviewed. When you meet me and you hear my story and what I'm about and whatever it may be, I promise you your mind will be changed. In South Africa, I think we have over a 30% unemployment rate, and 62% of that, or whatever it may be, is the youth. So we know that the majority of the unemployed in South Africa are young, and the likelihood, and I'm again making assumptions, is that they're fairly tech savvy. They may have a mobile cell phone with a camera and a microphone. I mean, there's research studies saying that in South Africa, there's actually 3 phones to 1 person. But a lot of them say, well, and essentially what we're saying to the candidate is we're allowing them to be interviewed upfront at the initial process and really given a fighting chance to be considered for this in-person interview, as opposed to being purely judged on a piece of paper, which is their CV. And I know for a fact, when I was hiring and I never used one-way interviews, I had hundreds of CVs in my inbox. And to be honest and to be fair, I didn't go through all of them.
No.
And the way that we've structured things, a typical screening call or first interview lasts between 30 to 45 minutes. With our platform, you can interview 10 people within that time and very quickly determine whether you want to interview them, because we've structured the way the interviews are done, where you can listen to the candidate's first answer for the first question and very quickly determine whether you want to listen to the next answer. But At least you've been able to have real insight. I mean, we actually had a finance director role through our platform, and one of the questions was, how would you deal with this tax problem? Now, CV would never have told you that, but I can very quickly determine if that candidate could deal with that tax problem. And I was like, that is a super cool answer. I want to meet with you and engage in a proper interview and a proper conversation with you.
Yeah, and I like the star-based. I mean, I presume this allows for the star-based interview mechanism. A situation you can ask questions around, which try to get alignment to the values. Which is quite interesting. It's actually, you talking earlier about you just want to get in front of people. I mean, I can vouch. You and I worked in a previous life together, and you helped me stand up a team in Johannesburg and many years ago. And I was certainly impressed when I saw you in person. I don't remember your CV being very bad. So you've obviously updated it.
I mean, if I had to look at that again, I'd be like, what are you thinking? But then again, that's just me being critical about myself.
We're getting a couple of questions in, and just to the audience, if there's any questions that we don't get to, I'm going to try. I'm not very good at multitasking, but I'll try and answer them in line. And in fact, Adrian has asked a good question around, and again, just linking in document management type solutions like DocuSign. So, this potentially plugs into, now you want to offer the candidate, now we're getting to the onboard stage. Do you have any comments around that? How the system potentially integrates into existing systems? Or?
Sure. So I think one of the most frequent conversations I have in my day-to-day is integration. It's such a loosely phrased topic. So the short answer is yes, we can integrate. How we integrate is really the question. I mean, it depends on the providers, the APIs that are involved. Do we even need APIs? What is the exchange, from a communication perspective? That being said, we're on an exciting journey. I probably can't say too much, and I hope my business partner is not on this call, or on this podcast, but we're busy redesigning our entire platform, and I can't say much more than that, but it's going to be the one-stop shop that everyone's possibly looking for, on another level. But from an integration perspective, it's also what's going to add value to our clients. Right now, our core focus is the interviewing platform. And the reason that we called it interviewME is the play on the word interview. So it's not necessarily just a recruitment platform, but it's a platform where you can interview people, whether it's research, whether it's testimonials. I mean, we've got companies using us to train people on how to conduct interviews better to make themselves more marketable. So right now, we're not trying to, knock it out the park right now with the platform. We want to be experts at what we have in our portfolio as it stands. But coming very soon, in January, all those integrations will be a fairly easy thing to do in a very quick process as well.
That sounds good. And it sounds like a platform I needed many years ago. I mean, again, as I said earlier, any tech companies I work with, the ones I've worked in before, as the hiring manager, we were the bottlenecks. We had talent people coming to try and meet us, to try and get us CVs, to try and, and this looks like the perfect solution for that. But I want to switch gear a little bit and switch into the next phase. You've now landed your talent and you're ready to bring them into the organization and onboarding. And, I was struck by, as I said, in a previous life, how you helped get a team up and running. We were doing some mobile data offering up in Johannesburg, and you really injected some energy into the team very quickly to get them going. And we made sales very quickly because of the playbooks. And I'm interested in the onboarding. I mean, you're busy building this business. I've seen a little bit on LinkedIn. I've seen you ringing the bell when you sign those big customers and having a shot of something on a Friday afternoon, like in a fines meeting. And it's quite fun. And just how you energize the team, how you onboard the team, what your process is around that. I'm just interested to hear.
Sure. I think before the onboarding, I think it's right. We're very particular in terms of who we choose to be a part of our team. And yes, they do one-way interviews as the initial screening process. But I think we really look at, I think it would be 5 key metrics. I think the one is does this candidate have drive and stamina? Are they able to illustrate that they've got grit and that they can push through and, give us examples? The other is business intelligence. Do the people that we work with take a keen interest in business? And I don't mean it like, hey, you need to know everything about business, but we really want people in our team to think. And I know that sounds like such a layman's term kind of comment to use, but a lot of people just come in and say, right, what do I need to do and achieve it? And because we're a startup, we're really encouraging people to think outside the box, and we really hide on them on their potential and not for them to conform as to what we expect. So when our teams come in, we put them in a corner and say, think, we want you to come up with solutions, a vision, a mission statement for your team. What is the purpose? How is it going to align with the other teams, etc. Right? So business intelligence is quite a phrase that I use quite broadly. The other is communication. Internal, external. How do we communicate with each other? How do we articulate what we're trying to achieve? And that's so important, because as soon as there's a communication barrier between 1 or 2 people in a team, it starts to really get quite messy, and it's hard to manage that. So that at the forefront is super important. Also, team player. We're a small business. You can see we don't have a massive office, so it's important that we're able to operate together as a team efficiently, and that there is no sharp elbows in our environment. We're all here to achieve a main common goal. And then the last is personality and humor. We've got to be able to get along with the people that we work with, so it's super important for us. From an onboarding perspective, I've kind of done it a couple of ways, and there's been no perfect solution for me. I mean, some teams have just operated, and I guess it's down to the people that we've hired. But I think understanding who your team are in quite a granular level is super important so that you can build trust and rapport. I think if you don't have trust with your team, you have very little. So when we do these one-to-ones on a weekly basis or whatever, we need to really go in there with intent in terms of what that meeting, what the outcome needs to be, what are we working towards, and really having a tailored coaching mentality for that individual. I think a lot of teams, just specifically in sales now, have quite a blanket approach where you all need to get on the phone and prospect 500 calls and make 1 million cold calls, and that doesn't really work. The other is self-learning and then coaching from an actual skills perspective. I think the biggest mistakes that I've made in the past is making the assumption that they've got it and they've maybe been in sales for years and they've got it waxed. And for me, getting the team to do some self-learning and actually then train the team, we're actually busy doing that. We did one this morning talking about tonality and how important tonality is in a business environment and how people perceive you. So I think that for me is the biggest thing. And then obviously we actually just had a session now with our team where we got each team to really just decide on what their vision is for the team specifically. We did it obviously as a company, but team-wise, what the team's vision is, what their mission is, what their purpose is, what are our strategic objectives in this team, how do we align with the other teams, and what the processes are in order for us to kind of work as a single unit, but obviously operating in different models. And it's really cool. I mean, I came into the business and I was like, our values are fun, winners, and respect. And everyone kind of just said, all right, well, that's what Jesse said, so that's what it is. And I was challenged last week, and we've now decided on some new core values in the business, and I think the team really enjoyed that, feeling a part of that. And I think the sooner you do that in a business, the better. And because we're a startup, we're fortunate enough to have that on as an entire team. Where in a larger corporate, maybe a little bit more difficult, but then departments can do that. And really, I think that's super important at the initial part, which is the onboarding phase. And then specifically in sales, is I realize that people still don't understand the difference between a benefit and a value proposition. And we're here to solve problems. And I think not even just in sales, like interviewME as a whole, we're here to solve a problem, but the benefit is not necessarily the value proposition. It's what you do with that benefit that is the ultimate value proposition. So if we save you time, that's the benefit. The value proposition is what you do with that time that adds additional value to your business. And as soon as we can start listening to our clients and figuring out how we unpack what their world looks like and what their actual problems are, is where we succeed. And the reason I'm mentioning this is if we can get that right up front in the initial onboarding phase, the rest is fairly smooth sailing.
There's a couple of things you said there, real nuggets. And I was actually at a meeting today with an engineering director who runs a number of teams for a scale-up. I wouldn't call them a scale-up. They're pretty established at this point, but growing very quickly. And she's probably not at the business very long at this stage, maybe 9 months or whatever it is. But I asked her about her onboarding, and she said it was absolutely amazing. The first couple of weeks, like the manager reached out to her and said, how do you like to be communicated with? What's your channel? Is it Slack? Do you like phone calls? Do you like text? How do you like to be communicated with? How do you like to communicate? Now, that's a complete reversal on, companies saying, right, you're in the company. This is how we do things here. And the managers have obviously created unique ways of communicating with different people based on their personalities. Found out if this person was an extrovert or an introvert, where they feel they get energy. And I found that was absolutely phenomenal. So, and then that brings me to the next point, which is you can actually create these teams and put the values per team, or we've used the word tenets before, or principles, whatever it is. And I often do that with big teams where you go in there and say, right, well, you're a support team. You're an internet security type team. You operate quite differently. So what are the values that you feel are important? What are the values that the other team does? And just allowing them to almost, I call it a business charter, but having their own business charters in place where their roles are clear, and also how they hand over to different teams. So, and it's really cool at startup level that you're talking about all of this stuff, because these are the foundations. And then to be challenged, I mean, I'd like to dive a bit deeper into how you were challenged. Were you challenged because of there were certain values missing, or you weren't having enough fun? What was it?
No, I think we stood for a little bit more than what I had thought, and to come up with clear values and what our mission is and mission statements and that for me was quite simplistic. But when you start getting input from the rest of the team as to what it is interviewME is, or what our business is, what are we striving to do? We're not just a recruitment platform. We're about the people. We're about the process. We're about all these other things. And I was like, oh, well, these are my words and this is what goes. And we came up with things that encompassed all the things that I genuinely believe are values, but a lot more. But we were able to summarize that in a way that is so easily depicted by anyone that's looking at it. We're like, oh, I get what they're about. And that's really, but I mean, my team literally, it was meant to be a 2-hour session and ended up being a 7-hour session because it was just so interactive and we got so much out of it. And I'm happy to invest that kind of time, with my people, because again, we're a unit, and it's not the Jesse show. It's not my colleague, the Nivi show. It's all about all of us. And I think when you invest the time early on, and we had inductions and we talk about all these things, our values, right on the word go, so that no one's coming in here with false expectations or under false pretenses that we're about something else. They're very clear as to who we are, what we're about, what we want to achieve, and how we're going to go about it. But in the same breath, we're completely open to changing things and working better with the team if we haven't been done so already.
And you know what, just on the sales side, tech sales is challenging these days. So you've got to keep the team energized. And I was at the Dublin Tech Summit recently, and there was a huge amount of talent type solutions out there. Onboarding solutions. There weren't any interview ones. So we'll probably get you to the Dublin Tech Summit next year. But for a sales team having to do a little bit of outbound or even responding to leads, there's a lot of competition out there. So you're finding you're carving a bit of a category and you're making it you're actually creating quite a nice value prop, as you say, for the sales team.
Yeah, I don't think we're not necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel in terms of how we sell. Being a startup, we don't have a monster marketing budget, so we've done old school. We're trying to identify companies that we see clear value for, and we cold call them. We're the nuisance to HR managers, and I think that's where the differentiator comes in our team, is if we can capture person on the other end that we're trying to showcase our platform to's attention with some serious impact and enthusiasm, and give them a reason to talk to us. That's I would say the hardest part. Then it's about making sure that we can showcase what problems we're solving. We can showcase that we're credible and we have some really cool clients and what we want from that call. And then 9 out of 10 times when we get the client in front of a demo, that's when the real selling comes. We're not even real selling. We're just identifying features in our tool, the benefits and the value propositions associated. And most of the companies will then go, okay, well, this makes sense for us, or no, it doesn't. So I think in terms of energy, we don't necessarily want to feel like a call center. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with call centers, but we're not about that. So I think having structure in a salesperson's day is incredibly important, breaking their day down so that they don't feel like this is this monotonous thing. In the training session that we had today, a good topic is, my team are making 50, 60 calls a day to approach companies to sell to, which is exactly kind of what we do. We may phone every client and say, hi, my name's Jesse. I'm calling from interview. This is what interviewME. This is what we do. Obviously, it's flat, but the tonality and the way that we deliver it, we need to make sure that our clients feel excited about it, because they've heard about interviewME right now on the call. We've obviously spoken about it 100 times. So we need to make sure that whenever we're selling or talking to people about interviewME, that we absolutely give it 100% from an enthusiasm perspective, from a passion perspective, to make sure that when the person that we're chatting to feels that and wants to give us the time of day. So we're not reinventing the wheel, but we are structuring our days a little bit more effectively. And we're also making sure that we're not just selling to people for the sake of it. We want to make sure that there is a clear need and we're going to add value to that business. And that's partly why we don't tie our clients into long-term contracts. Is because if you don't see the value, I don't expect you to be on board with us for longer than you are. It's a bit of pressure on me. And everyone says you should tie them at least into like a 3-month or a 12-month, and we obviously encourage that in various other ways. But it's not off the word go, because we want to make sure that if we're charging you, you need to see value, and if you don't, then you should leave. Because I, as a CEO, know that I'm not going to stay subscribe to a platform that adds no value, that we're wasting money.
And I think to wrap up, I mean, that's the same for employees, right? When they join an organization, they want to see value, they want to see that they can grow. And I think that's up to the job of everyone in this ecosystem, whether it's the talent people bringing people in, how that employee is enjoying their interview experience, as well as how they're being onboarded and promoted through the organization. Jesse, we haven't got any questions, which is a good thing, because it means that I've asked the right ones, or else no one's on the call. But we've had quite a few comments. So thanks to Bernadette, thanks to Bert, Adrian for your comment around DocuSign, and Shane and a few others. And I think people will be watching this afterwards as well. If there's any comments, reach out to Jesse, connect with me if you're not connected already. And thanks for taking your time after hours today to chat to both of us, or to listen to both of us.
Thank you, everybody, people.
Jesse, take it easy. Good chatting. Ciao.
Thanks, man. Ciao. Bye.